Hello and welcome to Monster of the Week, the only show on the internet that takes your favorite old school tabletop monsters, digs into their lore, ecology, and ultimately converts them into 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. Whether this is your first time here or you've been around since upload number 1, I am happy to see you, it's good to see you, and I hope you're ready to dig into the fantastical world of Dungeons and Dragons, because today's monster is nothing short of angelic. What the
Still
hell?
thy tongue, father of dungeons, for I am no angel.
I seriously need to start locking my front door here, guys. Also, for somebody who's not an angel, you're giving me pretty angelic vibes right now.
I'm an Archon. We are much better and cooler than angels. If thou art insistent on telling the world of my kind, thou could at least get thy facts straight, Dungeon Dad. Or should I say, Josiah?
Wait. How do you know my real name?
'Tis the gift of my kind. I know the true name of all things, even thou tubers. I also know the name of this episode's sponsor, the Seeds of Decay Kickstarter.
Do you want to just do the video? Because I can leave. No? Okay then. As I'm sure you guessed, the Word Archon is today's Monster of the Week. They are 7-foot tall celestial beings who act as guardians of universal truth. Their power stems from onomancy, which is the school of magic that involves understanding the fundamental language of the multiverse and using words and phrases of the language of truth, often called power words, to enact their will upon reality. To give you an example of what any of this means, let's take a look at the 9th level spell, Power Word Kill. Power Word Kill's description reads, you utter a word of power that can compel one creature to instantly die. If the creature you choose has 100 hit points or fewer, it dies. There is no saving throw, there's no way to dodge or avoid it, and much to the protest of all the rogues out there, no, evasion does not cut the penalty in half. If someone uses this spell on you, and you have fewer than 100 hit points, you take a filthy dirt nap. Power Word Kill is only one, albeit an extreme example, of how onomancy works. And the Word Archon is capable of doing some really interesting things with the power of language and a little sprinkle of divine magic.
'Tis more than a sprinkle. Thine girl is magic AF.
Next week, I'm doing a monster that can't speak common. Many celestial creatures, even non-angels, tend to share a lot of commonality in their design. One of the hallmarks of a divine celestial being in the D&D world, and often all across pop culture, is that they have big, broad, feathery wings. Some even have more than one set. The Word Archons, while they do have wings, they look a little bit different. They aren't made from soft angelic feathers, but rather a copious amount of parchment pages, each one with a different word of power etched on it. Speaking of appearances, the Word Archon's one and only appearance in the history of D&D's many publications is in this book, which was printed towards the end of D&D 3.5's life cycle, the Tome of Magic. If you'll forgive one tiny little tangent, this book is completely bonkers. It introduces a whole bunch of new concepts, which all at the time were brand new to the world of D&D. Most people think 5th edition is where Pact Magic and the Warlock was first born, but this book includes rules for Pact Magic along with 36 potential patrons for your players to sell their soul to. Not only that, but this book included a whole bunch of new spells and an entire system for Pact Magic and how its inner workings will all come together. There were also a bunch of new monsters that all made use of this brand new novel type of magic. It also included the same level of content and depth for something called shadow magic, as well as true name magic, which would eventually come to be known as onomancy.
Ahem.
Right, back to the Word Archon. As a creature meant to show off this new type of magic, the Word Archon, of course, is entirely built around the concept of true name magic. We are going to get into all the juicy lore and story tidbits as well as this creature's ecology, but before we do, it's important that we understand how the Word Archon fights and just exactly what this true name magic is capable of. So let's check out its moves and try to build an encounter, because it's time for Swooping in at a challenge rating of 8, the Word Archon is no slouch. Like many Celestials, it has a very fast fly speed, clocking in at 80 feet in this case. That means it's going to have a ton of mobility the second initiative is rolled. Something that does break away from the norm when it comes to most Celestials is that the Word Archon prioritizes intelligence as its primary mental stat rather than wisdom or charisma, the go-to for most Celestial beings. In this case, it seems the Word Archon chose book learning because after all, you have to study like a wizard in order to understand the language of the multiverse, especially when you want to use it as a magical tool. This is also reflected in the Word Archon's skills, as they get a +9 to every knowledge check. This likely won't be very useful in the pitch of battle, but you know what will be? Swinging around a giant hammer. The Word Archon gets 2 maul attacks per turn, which of course are going to deal your standard 2d6 plus strength bludgeoning damage, but it's also going to be rolling big style with an enchanted maul that deals an additional 2d6 radiant damage on top of that. But that's not all. As part of its multi-attack, the Word Archon can use one of its utterances. What is an utterance? Well, this action to use an utterance is where all of that flavor comes in of them being able to speak the language of the multiverse. It's time for some true name magic. Utterances work sort of the same way that casting a spell does. By default, the Word Archon has access to 4 different power words it can use at any time. Decay, which causes 3d6 necrotic damage to a single target. Nurture, which heals a target for 8d6. Shockwave, which can deal 2d6 non-lethal bludgeoning damage to a wide group of enemies, as well as potentially knock them prone. And lastly, the most interesting word in my opinion, Incarnation. Incarnation is a weird one because what it does is it allows the Word Archon to temporarily change the true name of a creature, or rather the Word Archon is allowed to amend their true name. This change lasts for 24 hours, but mechanically this means the target of the utterance is transformed to either have the Fiend, Fey, or Celestial type added to it in addition to its other types. This also has the effect of granting the target magical resistance, which gives them advantage on saving throws to resist magic and other magical effects. But there are a lot of ways this ability can be used for so much more. There are tons of spells and abilities in D&D that interact with specific creature types in a lot of fascinating ways. This ability to add a second creature type to a creature just complicates this further. For example, let's take a look at the Banishment spell. It causes a creature to disappear if they're already on their home plane of existence, such as a fire elemental that is on the plane of fire. When they disappear, they are simply sent to a harmless demiplane where they have to sit in timeout for a while before the spell ends and they come back. If the target is not on its home plane, when banishment is cast on it, the target is sent back to whatever plane of existence they are originally from.
Be gone, fuck!
And if they don't pass the spell saving throw, that transportation is permanent. So let's say that the Word Archon changes the type of this bandit captain into a fiendish humanoid, and then someone banishes them. Because the bandit captain is now fiendish, there's an argument to be made that if the bandit captain does not succeed on its saving throws to return from the banishment, they might now be permanently banished to the 9 hells or the abyss. Both are places where fiends come from, and both are places you definitely don't want to be banished to. Ultimately, a lot of this is going to come down to how the DM chooses to rule this interaction in the moment, but I'm sure there are a ton of really fun interactions out there with this ability and the wide array of spells and effects we have that target specific creature types. I also have no doubt you guys will find the most insane ones. Now, the final piece of the Word Archon's battle kit is its Aura of Menace trait. Our lovely Archon here projects an aura out to 20 feet in all directions. Any creature of the Archon's choosing that is within its aura must make a Wisdom saving throw. If the Archon's enemies can't pass the saving throw, they have disadvantage on attack rolls to target the Archon. That's pretty good, but none of these abilities on their own are particularly bonkers, busted, broken, overpowered. But all together, coupled with an 80-foot fly speed, The Word Archon is not an enemy to be taken lightly, especially when accompanied by a group of allies. As an adversary, the Word Archon is going to perform best when it's at the center of the action, ensuring their utterances deal damage to enemies when needed, heal allies when needed, and generally provide some semblance of crowd control. All the time, of course, swinging around a giant hammer to deal out a non-zero amount of hurt. However, it is important to understand not just how the Word Archons fight, but also why they fight. So let's get into their lore and ecology and go over a few. As one-off monsters from a semi-obscure book, we don't really have a ton to work off of when it comes to their lore and history. But what we do have is pretty dang interesting. Unlike almost all other Celestials, Word Archons are willing to travel far and away from their celestial home in order to protect concepts which they view as either noble or highly important. Fair warning, this is going to get a little bit cerebral. To quote the source material, Word Archons believe that true name magic is the most pure and perfect form of expression. They treat it as something sacred and holy. They use this power to righteous ends, seeking out evildoers and shutting them down, either through conviction of their words or by swinging a big-ass hammer at their head until they stop moving. While no Word Archon worth their font will allow any evildoer to get away with anything, they have a particular interest in bad guys who are seeking to pervert the very definition of noble concepts such as virtue, goodness, charity, or love. They fear that if left to evil devices over a long enough period of time, the true definition of those words might actually change. If the bar for goodness is allowed to slip, eventually the words of power that represent the concept of goodness will lose their effectiveness, and the very definition of their sacred words could be twisted or even changed altogether. This is kind of an esoteric concept, but I find it helps if we think about it using something less nebulous than the concept of goodness. Let's say there's a power word that you use to create water. You say the word, and a gallon of water appears in front of you. Awesome. Now let's say all the water in the multiverse has been corrupted and polluted to the point where the only water people are aware of is gross, cloudy doo-doo water. Because of this radical change over a very long period of time, the very definition of what people consider water might now be changed. When someone says, "Hey look, there's some water," the thing they are pointing out might no longer mean the same thing that it once did. The very definition of water has changed in such a profound way that it no longer holds the same meaning on a cosmic level. So it would stand to reason that if a Word Archon uses their true name magic to create water, what they would create would be a gallon of polluted doo-doo water. The concept remains the same for all words in Dungeons & Dragons. As time marches forward, certain words gain and lose power over certain things. The Word Archon's mission is to protect the true nature of words related to concepts that they value and cherish. They don't want the idea of goodness to become polluted. So an evil villain doing evil villain stuff is certainly something to be stopped. But an evil villain disguised as someone good doing something benevolent is the most heinous act in the eyes of a Word Archon. That means your corrupted clerics or tyrannical rulers who force propaganda on their people to make themselves seem as if they're a cool guy when actually they're not a very cool guy is a high priority to these creatures. The highest priority even. So, how do we actually use this creature at the D&D table? I personally love the idea of the Word Archon taking a special interest in something kind of small scale, but also something that they don't have time to deal with. They might come to the material plane and witness something kind of heinous happening in some backwater town, but because they have much more important things on their plate and other cosmic responsibilities to attend to, they gather up the party and kind of use them as their agents in this little backwater. I imagine them checking in with the party from time to time, providing what guidance and power they can, but mostly leaving it in their hands. Perhaps they simply task the party with discovering the true identity of a villain who is behind the scenes pulling the strings, so that eventually the Word Archon with the party by their side can confront this individual. If you want to use the Word Archon as an enemy of your party, perhaps you place the party in somewhat of a moral dilemma, where the thing they're trying to do might end up influencing the definition of a classically good word. Maybe in order to save their kingdom, they have to do something morally questionable, and they might find themselves on the wrong end of the Word Archon's maul. As our friend here mentioned earlier, Archons, while very similar to angels, are not the same. Archons tend to be more purely lawful good in nature, while angels, while also lawful good, can exhibit compassion and understanding in some circumstances. If an angel were to, say, catch a thief stealing bread to feed their family, they might lecture them on how stealing is wrong, but would be very unlikely to take great action against that individual as they understand why they were doing the thing they were doing. If anything, given the time, they might just help them find a job or something, I don't know. If an Archon were to catch a thief doing the same thing, they would likely bring them to the authorities and see them locked up, as stealing is objectively wrong and they were doing the wrong thing. This direct rules as written approach to being a good guy can sometimes lead to the party being at odds with a group of well-meaning Archons. They just simply refuse to break or even bend the rules in almost all instances. It doesn't really matter to them how high the overall stakes are. They want to win and they want to do it the right way. If you want to go full-on supervillain though, you could have the Archon set to be the primary bad guy of an adventure. This is what I like to call going the fallen Archon route. Perhaps the Archon in question became obsessed with onomancy, even well and beyond the rest of their kin. And in their obsession, they discovered the true definition of something long lost to time. And now they are determined to restore the ancient ways and bring about a state where the world now adheres to this ancient definition of some type of concept with no regard for how it's going to impact the rest of the multiverse or just life in general. Us mortals are fragile, man. You fucking look at us the wrong way and we just die sometimes. The only other thing I want to briefly touch on about the Word Archon's ecology is their wings. As you know now, their wings are made of parchment etched with ancient runes and words of power. This is just a little flavor detail, but like all good little flavor details, as the DM, you can take that and run pretty far with it. Having the party tasked with retrieving a specific power word from a specific Word Archon's wings could be a wild adventure. Similarly to retrieving an angel feather or something of that ilk, there are tons of ways the party could approach this. The Archon might just straight up agree to the exchange if the party asks. Maybe it will have the party do some other type of favor in return, or if it thinks the party's ends are pure, it might just help them out and throw them a bone, or a piece of paper with a weird word on it in this case. With that kind of setup, just finding the Archon might be the real challenge. They could of course also try to fight and kill the Archon and pluck it from the creature's body. Or maybe they want to try and steal it from the Archon in the weirdest heist movie ever. But regardless of how you choose to use this creature, I think it holds a ton of potential for both storytelling and pretty memorable encounters. If you found this video helpful, inspiring, or even just downright entertaining, please leave a like, leave a comment. Help me tell YouTube's algorithm that my channel isn't a massive garbage fire and is maybe okay sometimes. Maybe it's just a little garbage fire. If you do want to use this monster in your own D&D game, you can of course find the 3.5 stat block in the Tome of Magic, and if you're playing 5th edition, the 5e stat block is linked in the description below in the form of a Google document converted by yours truly. And while that document will contain everything you need to successfully run this creature, if you are one of my lovely patrons, you will also find the Monster Manual style 5th edition stat block on the Patreon page. And for those of you who are already patrons, thank you guys so much for supporting me and my projects and bringing me back week after week to talk about monsters from D&D's history. I appreciate you more than words, can describe. I cast power word appreciate on you. That's so fucking dumb. I would also be remiss if I did not mention the sponsor for this week's episode, the Seeds of Decay Kickstarter. A crack has formed in the darkness of the always green forest, leaking rot and decay. Trees are withering and crops are failing to mature. Strange, twisted creatures have been seen in the shadows. The Rot Weaver has returned. Will you save the forest from the spreading decay before it's too late? Seeds of Decay is a brand new adventure for 5th edition that brings you into the dark and whimsical world of daubers. Enjoy fully illustrated quests with unique maps, NPCs, monsters, and much more. Along with this grand adventure comes over 60 unique and scalable monsters that will tangle up every encounter, as well as new magic items, spells, races, classes, and subclasses. And if that wasn't enough, a brand new system for building contraptions and tools. You can check out the Kickstarter at seedsofdecay.com or by using the link in the description below. So once again, thank you everybody so much for watching. It was great to see you, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Until then,